Feather's Dead Horse Gulch Escape and Christmas Kill, 1887. Feather had always been a man who stayed to himself.
In the small frontier towns of the late 1800s, people noticed quiet men because most folks talked loudly, laughed hard, and shared stories in crowded rooms. Feather did none of that. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, his words were short and careful. Some people thought he was shy. Others thought he was hiding something. But most agreed on one thing. Feather was strong, patient, and used to a hard life. He had grown up moving from place to place, working on ranches, helping with cattle, fixing fences, and doing any job that paid a few coins and a meal. The land had shaped him. Long days under the sun, cold nights by small fires, and endless miles of open country had taught him how to survive. He trusted the land more than he trusted people. The land did not lie, gossip, or judge. It was tough, but it was honest. In the winter of 1887, Feather was staying near a small trading post. It was one of those lonely places where travelers stopped to rest, buy supplies, and hear news. The building was simple, made of rough wood with a small porch and a stable nearby. Inside, there was usually the smell of coffee, leather, and smoke from the stove. Men played cards, shared drinks, and argued about prices, weather, and old stories. Feather did not spend much time there, but he had come in that week to sell a few items and pick up supplies. At first, everything seemed normal. He stood near the counter, waiting his turn, listening to the low noise of voices around him. But trouble has a way of finding people, even those who try to avoid it. A disagreement started between Feather and another man over a small matter. It was the kind of argument that might have ended with angry words, and nothing more. But both men were tired, cold, and carrying their own problems. Voices grew louder, faces grew red. Other people in the room began to watch, sensing that the mood had changed. Feather tried to stay calm, but something in the other man's tone pushed him too far. Harsh words were said. The room felt tight, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The argument did not end cleanly. When it was over, people were shaken. Some looked away. Others whispered to each other. Feather knew right away that things had gone too far. Even though no one shouted for the law at that moment, he could feel it in his bones. Trouble had started, and it would not stay quiet for long. In frontier towns, news moved faster than the wind. By the next day, people were already talking. Stories changed as they were told again and again. Some made Feather sound worse than he really was. Others added details that never happened. But once a man's name was spoken in a bad way, it was hard to clean it again. Feather heard bits of these stories and felt a heavy weight in his chest. He knew that lawmen would soon start asking questions. He also knew that staying in one place would only make things harder. Feather was not a man who liked to run. He believed in facing problems, but he also believed in staying alive. The frontier was not kind to men who made mistakes. One bad moment could follow a man for the rest of his life. With winter closing in and snow starting to fall, he had to think quickly. He packed his few belongings, wrapped himself in his heavy coat, and prepared to leave before dawn. As he walked out of town, the sky was gray and low. Snow covered the ground in soft, uneven patches. His boots made slow, careful steps. Each step felt like a move away from the life he knew, even if that life had never been easy. He did not look back much. Looking back only made a man hesitate. Hesitation could be dangerous. Feather had heard of a place called Dead Horse Gulch. It was known as a rough, narrow stretch of land with steep sides and rocky paths. Not many people went there unless they had to. The weather was harsh, and it was easy to get lost. For Feather, that made it a good place to hide. Few riders would choose that path unless they were desperate or very determined. Feather hoped that the land itself would help cover his tracks. The journey to the gulch was long and tiring. The cold cut through his clothes, even with all the layers he wore. His breath came out in white clouds. At night he made small fires, careful to keep them low so no one would see the light from far away. He ate simple food, dried meat and hard bread, chewing slowly and thinking about his next move. His thoughts were heavy. He replayed the argument in his mind again and again, wishing he had chosen different words, wishing he had walked away sooner. Fear followed him like a shadow. Every sound in the distance made him pause. The cry of a bird, the snap of a branch, the howl of wind through rocks, all sounded like possible danger. He imagined riders on his trail, lawmen with serious faces, people pointing and whispering. Even when he was alone, he did not feel truly alone. The idea of being found stayed with him every moment. When he finally reached the edge of Dead Horse Gulch, he stopped and looked down into it. The land looked wild and broken. Tall rock walls rose on both sides. The path below was narrow and uneven. Snow rested in deep pockets, and shadows made it hard to see what lay ahead. It was not a welcoming place, but Feather did not need welcome. He needed cover, time, and a chance to think. He made his way down carefully, testing each step. A single wrong move could send him sliding or worse. His hands were numb from the cold, but he used them to steady himself. By the time he reached a small flat area deep in the gulch, his legs ached and his body felt heavy. Still, he felt a strange sense of relief. This place was hidden. It was quiet. For now, it was safe. Feather built a small, rough shelter using branches, rocks, and a piece of canvas he carried. It was not much, but it would block some of the wind. He cleared snow, made a small fire pit, and melted snow for water. These simple tasks gave him something to focus on. Work helped keep his mind from running in circles. When his hands were busy, his thoughts slowed down. At night, as he lay wrapped in his blanket, he stared up at the dark sky between the rocks. Stars looked sharp and cold. The wind made low, lonely sounds. He thought about his life, the many places he had been, and how quickly things had changed. One bad moment had pushed him into hiding like an animal. The thought made him feel angry and sad at the same time. He also thought about the people back in town. He wondered what they were saying now. He imagined lawmen walking into the trading post, asking questions, writing down his name. He imagined riders studying tracks in the snow. Each image made his stomach tighten, but he also knew that worrying too much would not help. He had to stay sharp. He had to think clearly. Days passed slowly. The gulch became his whole world. He learned how the light moved across the rocks. He learned where the wind was strongest and where it was calmer. He listened for distant sounds and watched for any sign of movement. The isolation began to change him. Without people, a man's thoughts grow louder. Every memory, every fear, every regret seemed bigger in the quiet. Still, Feather held on. He told himself that this was only temporary. He needed time. Time for things to cool down. Time for the talk in town to fade. Time to decide what to do next. He did not know if he would ever be able to return to a normal life, but he was not ready to give up. Deep inside, he hoped that Dead Horse Gulch would be a place of waiting, not an ending. A place where he could hide, think, and plan. The winter was long, and the cold was cruel, but Feather believed that if he stayed alert and patient, he could survive it. For now, his escape had worked. He was out of sight. But he also knew that the story of what had happened would not disappear so easily. Trouble had a long memory on the frontier, and Feather's journey was only beginning. Feather woke up before sunrise, as he had done for most of his life. The cold was the first thing he felt. It crept into his bones and made his fingers stiff. For a few seconds he forgot where he was. Then the rocky walls of Dead Horse Gulch came back into his mind, and he remembered that this narrow, lonely place was now his home. He pulled his blanket tighter and sat up slowly, listening to the wind move through the rocks. The gulch was quiet in a way that felt heavy. There were no voices, no wagons, no sounds of people starting their day. Only the soft crunch of snow shifting and the distant call of birds broke the silence. Feather stood, stretched his aching muscles, and rubbed his hands together to bring some feeling back into them. He checked the small fire pit. Only gray ash remained. He gathered a few dry sticks he had hidden under a rock ledge and carefully started a new fire. The small flames gave him comfort, even though they also reminded him to stay careful. Smoke could be seen from far away if he was not smart. Food was becoming a problem. The supplies he carried were never meant to last long. He counted what he had left and felt a tight feeling in his chest. Dried meat was running low. The hard bread was almost gone. He knew he would soon have to hunt or find another way to get food. But hunting meant moving, and moving meant leaving tracks. Tracks meant risk. Every choice felt dangerous in some way. Feather spent part of the morning walking slowly along the narrow paths of the gulch, learning it better. He memorized turns, rocky corners, and places where someone could hide or watch from above. He wanted to know this land like he knew the back of his hand. If anyone came looking, he needed every small advantage. He noticed old animal trails and places where water sometimes ran in warmer weather. Even in winter, knowing these paths mattered. As the day went on, his thoughts grew darker. Being alone gave him too much time to think. He replayed the moment at the trading post again and again. In his mind, he changed small details, imagining better choices, calmer words, a different ending. But no matter how many times he replayed it, the truth stayed the same. What was done could not be undone. That thought made his chest feel heavy, as if a weight sat there all day. Sometimes anger rose inside him. He felt angry at the other man, angry at the town, angry at himself. He wondered how a small disagreement had turned his whole life upside down. Other times, fear took over. What if the lawmen were closer than he thought? What if someone had already followed his trail? He found himself stopping often, listening hard, trying to hear sounds that were not there. The quiet played tricks on his mind. At night, sleep did not come easily. The cold and his worries kept him awake. When he did sleep, his dreams were restless. He dreamed of the trading post, of faces watching him, of voices calling his name. He would wake up suddenly, heart pounding, and for a moment he would not know if he was dreaming or if someone was really there. Each time he had to sit still and listen until he was sure he was alone. After several days, Feather knew he could not just sit and wait. He needed more food. He also needed to know what was happening beyond the gulch. Staying blind was almost as dangerous as being seen. He decided to move carefully and quietly, only short distances, and only at times when he believed the risk was lowest. One cold morning, he followed an old animal trail that led to a small, open area where he hoped to find something to hunt. The snow showed signs of small animals. He waited patiently, hidden behind rocks, barely moving. Patience was something the land had taught him well. After a long time, he was able to catch enough to make a small meal. It was not much, but it gave him strength and hope. Cooking the food quietly and quickly, he felt a small sense of victory. Even in hiding, he could still survive. Still, every small success came with worry. The smell of cooking could travel. The marks in the snow could be seen. Feather spent time covering his tracks, brushing snow back over disturbed areas, and choosing paths that were hard to follow. It was slow, careful work. His hands became rougher and more cracked from the cold. His face felt tight and dry. The gulch was shaping him, hardening him in new ways. As the days turned into weeks, the isolation began to affect his mind. He talked to himself sometimes, just to hear a human voice, even if it was his own. He remembered old songs and hummed them quietly. He thought about people from his past, old friends, old jobs, places where he had once felt safe. These memories were both a comfort and a pain. They reminded him of what he had lost and what he might never get back. Feather also began to feel a change inside himself. The quiet and fear made him more alert, but also more tense. Small things made him jump. His thoughts sometimes raced, jumping from one worry to another. He felt as if the gulch was closing in on him, not just with its rocky walls, but with its silence. The longer he stayed, the more he felt cut off from the rest of the world. He wondered what people in town thought now. Had the talk grown worse? Had lawmen arrived? Were they still looking, or had they turned to other matters? Not knowing was the hardest part. The mind fills empty space with dark ideas. Feather tried to remind himself that time could help. People on the frontier moved on quickly. New problems always came, but he could not fully trust that hope. Some evenings, as the sun dropped behind the rocks and the sky turned soft colors, Feather felt a deep loneliness. He watched the light fade and felt like he was fading with it. A man could become invisible in a place like this, not just to others, but to himself. He worried that if he stayed too long, he would forget who he was before all this trouble. At the same time, a harder edge grew in him. Living this way made him sharper, quicker to react, quicker to judge danger. The fear and anger mixed together, changing how he saw the world. He started to think less about what was right and more about what was necessary. Survival became the main rule. Everything else felt smaller compared to staying alive. By the end of this time in the gulch, Feather was no longer the same quiet man who had walked out of town. He was more tense, more watchful, and more worn down. His beard had grown rough. His clothes smelled of smoke and cold air. His eyes carried the look of a man who slept lightly and trusted little. The isolation, the hunger, and the constant worry were slowly shaping him into someone harder and more unpredictable. Even he could feel it happening. Sometimes that scared him. Other times, he accepted it as the price of survival. The gulch was no longer just a hiding place. It was changing him from the inside out. Deep down, Feather knew this could not last forever. Sooner or later, he would have to leave, to face the world again, to take another risk. But for now, Dead Horse Gulch held him in its cold grip. It gave him shelter, but it also took something from him each day. His fear grew, his anger simmered, and his patience was tested. Part 2 of his journey was not about action or escape. It was about waiting, surviving, and slowly becoming someone new under the weight of silence and fear. The quiet days in the gulch were shaping the man who would one day step back into the world, carrying the marks of this lonely time with him. Feather began to feel the change in the air before he fully understood it in his mind. The days were still cold, but there was a different feeling. a sense that time was moving forward whether he was ready or not. He counted the days by the rising and setting of the sun and by the slow shrinking of his food supply. No matter how careful he was, he knew he could not stay hidden forever. The gulch had kept him alive, but it could not give him everything he needed. One morning he sat near his small fire, staring into the weak flames. The fire crackled softly, and the sound felt loud in the deep quiet. Feather thought about how long it had been since he had seen another person. He missed simple things he never thought he would miss, like hearing voices, smelling fresh bread, or even arguing over small matters. Isolation had a way of making even hard memories feel softer. As Christmas grew closer, Feather felt more restless. The holiday meant little to him in the past, but now it stood as a reminder of time passing and of the world continuing without him. He imagined towns preparing, people hanging small decorations, children waiting for treats, and families gathering around warm fires. The thought made him feel both warm and sad at the same time. He was far from all of that, hiding in a cold gulch, living like a shadow. The restlessness pushed him toward a risky decision. He needed supplies, and he also needed information. Not knowing what was happening in the nearby settlements was eating at him. He told himself he would be careful, that he would only go close enough to listen and maybe trade quietly. He planned his route in his mind again and again, choosing paths that would be less traveled. He waited for a day when the weather might cover some of his tracks. When the day came, Feather packed what little he could carry and left the gulch before dawn. The sky was pale and the cold bit at his face. Each step away from the gulch felt heavy. The gulch had become a strange kind of shelter, even with all its hardships. Leaving it meant stepping back into danger. Still, he kept moving. Hunger and uncertainty pushed him forward. As he got closer to the settlement, he slowed down. He stayed to the edges, using trees, rocks, and dips in the land to stay out of sight. He watched from a distance first. Smoke from chimneys told him people were home. The faint sound of voices and movement carried on the cold air. It felt strange to be near people again after so long alone. His heart beat faster, and his hands felt tense, ready to react to anything. Feather entered the outskirts of town carefully. He kept his head low and his coat pulled tight. He tried to look like just another tired traveler, though inside he felt far from normal. The town looked different through his eyes now. Where once he might have seen simple buildings and familiar faces, now he saw danger and judgment everywhere. Every person who passed him felt like a possible threat. He stopped near a small store and listened. People were talking about holiday plans, about weather, about small town matters. He heard laughter, and for a brief moment, he felt a sharp pain of longing. He wanted to be part of that simple world again, but he knew he could not let his guard down. Feather managed to trade quietly for a few basic supplies. He kept the exchange short and avoided drawing attention. Still, being around people made his nerves tight. He felt like his name was written on his back even though no one had said it. He could not shake the feeling that someone might recognize him, even if they did not. As he moved through town, he noticed a man watching him longer than the others. The look was not friendly, but it was not clear either. Feather tried to ignore it and kept walking, but the feeling stayed with him, like a thorn under the skin. He told himself not to imagine things, yet his instincts, sharpened by weeks in hiding, would not let it go. Later that day, Feather found himself in a small public place where people gathered to talk and warm up. The holiday feeling was stronger here. There were small decorations, and someone was humming a tune. The warmth and noise made Feather feel out of place. His clothes were worn, his face tired, and his eyes carried too much weight for a place like this. A tense moment began when a local man spoke to him. At first, the words were simple, maybe even harmless, but something in the tone felt sharp to Feather. After weeks of isolation and fear, his patience was thin. He heard more in the words than might have been meant. The local man, in turn, seemed to sense Feather's edge and responded with his own hard tone. The space between them filled with tension. People nearby noticed and grew quiet. The holiday mood faded in that small moment. Feather felt his heart beat harder. His mind flashed back to the trading post, to how quickly things had gone wrong before. He told himself to stay calm, to walk away. But anger and stress rose inside him like a fire that had been banked too long. Words were exchanged that should not have been. Each one made the situation worse. Feather felt trapped, as if the walls were closing in on him again, just like in the Gulch. The local man stood his ground, and the air felt thick with unspoken threat. Feather's thoughts raced. He thought about being recognized, about being turned in, about losing his chance to stay free. Fear mixed with anger, and together they pushed him toward a terrible moment. What followed happened fast and changed everything. The argument turned into a tragic event that would forever mark that Christmas in the small town. The joy of the season was shattered, replaced by shock, fear, and grief. People would later talk about how quickly happiness turned into darkness that day. Feather, in the middle of it, felt as if time itself had broken. In the moments after, the town was frozen in disbelief. Voices rose, people rushed, and confusion spread. Feather stood there for a brief second, realizing what had happened and what it meant. There was no going back now. Whatever chance he had of quietly disappearing was gone. His name would be spoken again, louder and with more anger than before. Feather did not wait to see what would happen next. Instinct took over. He turned and fled, pushing through cold air and narrow paths, moving as fast as his tired body would allow. The sounds of the town faded behind him, replaced by the harsh sound of his own breathing and the crunch of snow under his boots. His heart felt like it might break from his chest. As he ran, his mind was full of chaos. He felt horror at what had happened, fear of what was coming, and a deep, heavy sadness. The Christmas season, once a distant thought, was now tied forever to this dark memory. He knew the town would never forget it. Neither would he. By the time he reached the edge of the wilderness again, his legs were shaking and his lungs burned. He did not stop until he felt he was far enough away to breathe without panic. He leaned against a tree, bent over, trying to steady himself. The cold air filled his lungs, and his hands trembled. Feather understood now that everything had changed. The quiet hiding in the Gulch was over. The world would be searching for him with new strength and anger. What had happened in town would spread fast, carried by frightened voices and hard facts. The law would not rest easily now. As he slowly made his way back toward rough land and hidden paths, Feather felt the full weight of what he carried. He was no longer just a man in trouble over a dispute. He was now a man marked by a dark Christmas event. The fear inside him was deeper than before, and so was the feeling that he was being pushed toward a path with fewer and fewer choices. Part 3 of Feather's story was the turning point. It was the moment when his attempt to quietly survive became something much bigger and much darker. The holiday that should have been filled with peace became a memory of loss and shock. And Feather, once a quiet man trying to stay out of trouble, now found himself running from a past that had grown too heavy to escape easily. Feather did not stop running until his body forced him to slow down. His legs felt weak, and his chest burned with every breath. The cold air cut into his lungs, but he welcomed the pain because it reminded him he was still alive. He leaned against a large rock, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to calm the storm inside his head. The sounds of the town were gone now. Only the wind and his own heavy breathing remained. When he finally opened his eyes, the world felt different. It was not just fear anymore. It was a deep understanding that his life had crossed another line. What had happened in town had changed everything. He knew that people would be talking, that riders would be sent out, and that lawmen would not take this lightly. The quiet time he had in Dead Horse Gulch felt like a distant memory. Now the chase would be real. Feather forced himself to think clearly. Panic would only lead to mistakes. He checked his supplies and felt a heavy sadness when he saw how little he had left. The few items he had traded for would help, but not for long. Still, he had no choice. He had to keep moving. Standing still meant being found. He chose rough paths on purpose. He climbed rocky slopes, crossed narrow ridges, and moved through thick patches of trees. These places were harder to travel, but they also made it harder for anyone to follow. Each step was slow and careful. He watched for broken branches, soft snow, and any sign that someone might be behind him. His eyes were always moving. His ears were always listening. As the hours passed, exhaustion settled into his bones. His body felt heavy, but his mind would not rest. He kept thinking about the faces in town, the shock, the fear, and the way everything had changed in just a few moments. The weight of it pressed on him, making it hard to think of anything else. He tried to push the thoughts away, but they came back again and again. By nightfall, Feather found a hidden spot between large rocks where the wind was weaker. He did not light a fire. The cold was painful, but the risk of being seen was worse. He wrapped himself in his coat and blanket and tried to sleep in short, light stretches. Every small sound made him tense. A falling rock, a gust of wind, even the movement of his own blanket felt like a possible danger. The next days blurred together. Feather moved, rested, then moved again. He avoided open land and stayed in shadows as much as possible. He crossed frozen streams carefully and climbed over fallen trees. His hands became cracked and sore. His boots were worn and his feet ached. Still, he kept going. Survival was no longer just a goal. It was a rule that guided every choice. From time to time, he thought he heard distant sounds that made his heart jump. The faint echo of hooves, the distant call of voices or shapes moving far away on ridges. Sometimes it was real. Sometimes it was only his tired mind. But each time it pushed him to change direction, to go deeper into rough land, to make his trail harder to follow. Feather also noticed how his thoughts were changing. He was becoming more guarded, more suspicious of everything. Even when he found a place that felt safe, he did not fully relax. The constant pressure made him sharper, but it also made him harder inside. He felt less like the quiet worker he had once been and more like a hunted man, always ready to move, always ready to hide. Hunger became a constant companion. He rationed his food carefully, taking small bites and saving what he could. Sometimes he found small animals to hunt, but it was not easy. Winter made everything harder. The cold slowed him down, and the snow showed every step. Each meal felt like a small victory, but it never felt like enough. As Feather traveled, he thought about the Gulch and how it had once felt like a hiding place. Now even that seemed too close to town, too easy to search. He knew that lawmen and local riders would likely check places like that first. He needed to go where fewer people would follow, where the land itself would be his shield. He moved toward higher, rougher country, where the trails were thin and the weather even colder. The wind was stronger there, and the nights were bitter. But fewer people traveled that way, especially in winter. Feather accepted the cold as the price of being harder to find. In his quiet moments, he wondered how his story was being told. He imagined people in town gathered together, sharing what they thought they knew. He imagined his name being spoken with fear and anger. He imagined writers studying tracks and planning where to go next. These thoughts made him feel smaller and more alone than ever. At the same time, a strange sense of determination grew inside him. He told himself that he would not give up easily. He had survived hard work, long journeys, and dangerous weather before. He had learned to live with little. He had learned to trust his instincts. Now he had to use everything he had learned just to stay one step ahead. Some days he felt almost numb. The fear and stress had been so strong for so long that his mind tried to protect itself by going quiet. In those moments, he moved like a machine, focused only on the next step, the next hill, the next hidden place to rest. Feelings were pushed aside so he could keep going. Other days, the emotions came rushing back. Regret, sadness, and anger mixed together. He thought about how different his life might have been if he had walked away from that first argument, if he had never gone back into town, if he had chosen another path. These thoughts hurt, but they also reminded him that he was still human, still capable of feeling, even in all this hardship. Feather's body grew thinner. His face became more lined from cold and worry. His eyes carried a tired look, but also a sharpness that had not been there before. He was becoming a man shaped by pursuit and survival. The land was carving its mark into him, just as surely as time had done. Every evening, as the sun went down and the sky turned dark, Feather found a hidden place to rest. He would sit quietly, listening to the world around him. Sometimes he talked softly to himself, reminding himself to stay strong, to stay smart, to keep moving. These quiet words were the only comfort he had. He knew that the search for him would not end quickly. What had happened in town was too serious, too shocking to be forgotten. The law would keep looking. People would stay alert. His name would be remembered. That knowledge sat heavy on him, but it also made him more careful than ever. Part 4 of Feather's journey was a time of constant movement and growing pressure. The land no longer felt like a place to hide peacefully. It felt like a long, hard road where every step could bring danger or safety. Feather was tired, hungry, and worn down, but he was still moving. He was no longer just running from trouble. He was running from a story that was growing bigger than him, a story that followed him like a shadow. With each mile, he carried not only his small pack, but also the weight of what had happened and the fear of what might still come. The chase had truly begun, and Feather knew that his life would never be the same again. Feather's strength was slowly fading, even though his will to survive was still strong. Days of cold, hunger, and constant movement had worn him down. His body felt older than it should have. Every step hurt. Every breath in the freezing air felt sharp. Still, he kept going, because stopping felt more dangerous than moving. Ow. The land around him became rougher and more empty. There were fewer signs of people and fewer clear paths. Tall hills, thick trees, and deep snow made travel slow and difficult. Feather welcomed the emptiness, even though it made survival harder. Fewer people meant fewer chances of being seen, but it also meant fewer chances to find help, food, or shelter. Every choice came with a cost. At times, Feather felt as if he was becoming part of the wilderness itself. His clothes blended with the colors of dirt, rock, and snow. His movements became quiet and careful. He learned to read the wind, to sense changes in the weather, and to notice small signs in the land. These skills kept him alive. but they also pulled him farther away from the man he used to be. Loneliness followed him like a silent companion. Days could pass without seeing another human being. At first, this felt like safety, but over time, it began to feel heavy. A man needs more than just food and shelter. He needs to know he still belongs to the world of people. Feather sometimes wondered if he would ever truly belong again. In quiet moments, he thought about his past. He remembered long days working under the sun, simple meals shared with other workers, and small laughs over tired jokes. Those memories felt like they belonged to another life. He held on to them because they reminded him that he had once been more than a man on the run. They reminded him that he had once had choices that were not shaped by fear. The cold nights were the hardest. Feather would find a hidden place, wrap himself tightly, and try to sleep. But sleep came in short pieces. His dreams were filled with old faces, loud voices, and moments he wished he could change. Sometimes he woke up with his heart racing, unsure where he was. It took a few quiet breaths to remind himself that he was still in the wild, still alone, still moving forward. As time passed, Feather began to understand something deep inside himself. Running could not last forever. No matter how far he went, his past would always be part of him. He could change his location, but he could not erase what had happened. This thought did not mean he was ready to give up, but it made him think more about what kind of ending his story might have. Some days he imagined disappearing completely, going so far into rough country that no one would ever find him, living quietly, far from towns and people. It sounded peaceful in his mind, but he knew the truth. Life like that would be harsh and lonely. A man could survive, but would he truly live? The question stayed with him. Other days, he imagined being caught. The thought filled him with fear, but also with a strange sense of relief. The running, the hiding, the constant worry would be over. The idea scared him, but it also tempted him in quiet moments when he was too tired to keep going. He did not want that ending, but he could not pretend it was impossible. Feather also thought about surrendering on his own terms, turning himself in, facing whatever came next, and stopping the endless chase. This idea came and went in his mind. Some days it felt like the brave choice. Other days it felt like giving up. He did not know which was true. All he knew was that every path in front of him was hard. The land did not care about his choices. The wind still blew. The snow still fell. The sun still rose and set. Nature moved on without him, reminding him how small one man's troubles were in the wide world. This thought sometimes gave him comfort. Other times, it made him feel even more alone. One evening, Feather sat on a rocky edge, looking out over a wide, empty valley. The sky was painted with soft colors as the sun went down. For a moment, everything was quiet and still. In that peaceful moment, Feather felt something he had not felt in a long time: clarity. He understood that no matter what happened next, his story had already become something larger than him. People would talk about Dead Horse Gulch. They would talk about the dark Christmas. They would talk about the man who ran into the wild. Some stories would be true. Others would not. But his name would live on in words and whispers, shaped by fear, curiosity, and time. Feather did not know if he would be caught, if he would turn himself in, or if he would fade into the land like a shadow. Each ending was possible. The uncertainty was heavy, but it was also honest. Life on the frontier was full of unknowns. A man could plan, but the land and fate often decided differently. What Feather did know was this: he had been changed forever. The quiet worker who once tried to stay out of trouble was gone. In his place was a man shaped by fear, survival, regret, and hard choices. He carried these things inside him, no matter where he went. As he stood up and prepared to move again, Feather took one last look at the valley. He breathed in the cold air and felt it fill his lungs. He did not know if this path would lead to freedom, capture, or something in between. But he knew he would keep moving until his strength or fate told him otherwise. His story became a warning told around fires and in small towns. People would say that one bad moment could change a whole life. They would say that the frontier was not just wide and free, but also unforgiving. They would speak of how a man could be pushed from quiet living into a life of running, all because of a few choices and a hard turn of events. Feather's journey did not end in a clear way that everyone could agree on. Some believed he was finally caught. Some believed he disappeared into the wild and was never seen again. Others believed he surrendered quietly and faced his future. The truth became mixed with stories over time. But one thing was certain. The events at Dead Horse Gulch and the dark Christmas of 1887 left a mark that did not fade easily. Feather became more than just a man. He became a story, a lesson, and a reminder of how quickly life could change on the harsh frontier. In the end, Feather's escape, his running, and his uncertain fate showed that survival is not just about staying alive. It is also about carrying the weight of what has happened and choosing how to face what comes next. Whether he found peace, justice, or endless wandering, his story remained a powerful example of how one winter, one argument, and one tragic day could shape a lifetime.